Hey, this is Karen, Coach's Corner Chats, and on the episode today, I have Steve Rollins. Steve, where are you at, and what are you up to?
So I'm out in Princeton, New Jersey, which is halfway in between New York City and Philadelphia, for those who aren't that familiar with this part of the East Coast. And right now, from a coaching standpoint, I'm running supplemental training. I have about 50 kids. We practice several times a week, probably around 20-ish or so at a time. And I do that because around a decade ago, I got away from coaching teams when my kids started playing. So, my wife had the come to Jesus moment with me when she said, do you want to go coach other people's kids, or do you want to watch your kids play? And so for the last decade or so, I've been really in the supplemental space, not doing a lot of teams, basically because I need my weekends open to do my own kid stuff.
What is entailed within a supplemental, and how do you get those kids to come to you and what have you?
So it's completely word of mouth, right? So I do it completely free, right? I don't charge the kids a dime. They come, they don't come. That's completely up to them. The only thing that I generally ask, because I do, my planning and stuff, is that they just let me know if they're going to a show. And then it's just word of mouth. It's like who heard about this or who heard about that, and their friends and their teammates. And so I have kids probably definitely from the 7 top clubs in the area. So I have kids who play MLS Next who come for supplemental. I have kids that play ECNL. I have kids that play GA. And those are the kids who generally show up. I have a couple of local town kids too. But for the most part, they're what we would say, more elite league kids. And I think that has to do with just, the kids who have the mindset to go out there and get 2 extra hours in several times a week are the ones who are, better in their career and their own journeys.
How did you get such a high level of player? Because when I heard it, I was thinking, oh, this might be just kind of more of a rec thing, but it sounds like these are some high level kids that maybe are going to college or may have aspirations of going to the MLS or something larger.
Yeah, so I would say over 90% of the kids I have are going to play college ball, right? I'm forecasting out a couple of years. Those who have been through there have already reached that stage, but it's about 90% will play college ball. I had a lot of professionals when I used to coach over in Europe, but none since I've been here in the US.
So I was going to ask, so you talked about kind of making a fork in the road when when your wife came to you and said, hey, do you want to watch the kids or whatever? What's your coaching kind of beginnings? Where did you start getting into well, let's start off. Were you a player back when you were in your youth?
Yeah. So I played in my youth. I played, back in the 70s. This was when state teams and ODP teams were big. So I played in all that. I got an opportunity to play at the Ajax Academy for a few years. And so I did that. And then I came back to the States and kind of lost the soccer way, when you're dismissed, when this was your dream and you're going to make all these big things and you're a kid and you get dismissed. It was rough. So I actually fenced for a while, and I was a Division I fencer. Went to college on a full ride. Didn't pay a dime for school, and then got back into coaching probably late 20s, early 30s. So several decades ago, and I was able to contact a bunch of my friends who had gone through a lot of the academies in Europe and stuff, and they were able to hook me up. And so I went and got my UEFA licenses. I topped out as a B. As an A, you kind of have to be coaching full time. And from then, for let's say the last 15, 20 years, I'm fortunate that my daytime job, I was based in Europe. So I would go to the local academy, where I had friends, whether that be in the Netherlands or Spain or wherever I was, and say, hey, look, I'm going to be here for a month. Can I assist on one of the U12, U14 teams? And, since I wasn't looking at it as, a way to make money, it was always free to them. So, somebody to pick up the cones and stuff, they were more than happy to let me do that. And so that's really where I started. And then I, became more into, I was one of the assistants with the U12s or the U14s. I did do U16s for a club in Spain and stuff, but it was always an assistant role uh, in Europe. I never, because I always came home on the weekends, I never was there for many of the games.
So how is it that, so it sounds like you have a lot of like overseas experience. What was the, how did you even get to the point where you got to even experience the Ajax Academy?
So, so, as a player, I don't know how it happened. Like I was 13, I just, remember being sat down at the kitchen table one day and saying, "Hey, look, you have this chance. Do you want to go play?" I know it was somehow done through U.S. Soccer, right? We didn't have in the 70s academies here,
Mhm.
and whatever pawns were moved here and there, it was an opportunity I got. I like to say I wasn't very good. I got a water for a lot of good players. But I was fast, so I could get it to them quickly.
Hmm.
That was my stint there. And then, on the coaching side, there were people that I knew, in the Netherlands and stuff from when I was a kid, and I just called them up and I said, "Hey, look, I want to get into coaching. Can you help me?" And they said, "Sure."
I think that's so cool because I'm hearing that more and more as I talk to coaches, is how many coaches, when you reach out to them, are like, yeah, come on over. And like you said, even maybe for a month or just for a stint, everyone's always willing to kind of help. What are some of the things that, now that you had that experience over in Europe and being here in the States, what are some of the things? Are there differences in coaching styles? What do you see as differences or maybe similarities in the two?
So I think a lot of the differences in coaching styles has to do with revenue streams, right? So when I'm coaching in Europe or working with coaches in Europe who, make a living out of this, they're not judged on how many U12 trophies they put on a shelf. They're judged by how many of their U12s skip U14s and go straight to U16, right? Because the clubs make their money on selling the 16 to 20-year-olds. That's where they make their money. The parent part is, insignificant. I mean, it's basically what we pay in the States for uniforms. Um, so, all those clubs are really focused on developing a kid. So between 16 and 20, they're able to be sold to a bigger professional organization. Here, and through no fault of generally the coaches, right? Their income or their livelihoods are based upon how many parents they can keep happy to sign up for next year, right? And what do you keep parents happy with? By putting a trophy on the mantelpiece. So when they have their Christmas party, they can tell all their friends that little Susie won X, Y, and Z Super Elite Premium tournament last year. And isn't she great? She's going to be a superstar, the next Mia Hamm. I am dating myself, but I guess, next Carly Lloyd or whoever is the one nowadays. And so the focus is really different. I have a lot of coaches who I respect a lot who work in like the ECNL field, uh, and they know their kids can't play. They know they can't, kick a ball with both feet at 15, 16 years old, but it doesn't matter to them because that's not what they're charged to do, right? They're charged to go out there and win a game. And how do you win a game against 14 and 15-year-olds? You put a lot of pressure on them, you got to make a mistake. And so they look for kids who are, overly athletic. And overly, I don't mean like freakishly. I mean like on the athletic side of the average kid. And if I can put, 15 kids on a field, 16 kids on a field who can outrun everybody else, I'll win the majority of my youth games. And if that's what I want to do, it's not a difficult thing to do. I used to tell people, when I was coaching, teams here in the States, that if I wanted to win a U11 game, I could do it, right? If that was the most important thing to me, I could do it, right? We all know what it is. You put your biggest kid in the back who can kick the ball the furthest. You put your fastest kid up front, and you just launch it 30 times a game. They'll hook up 2 or 3 times. You'll win most of your games. I mean, it's not a recipe that everybody doesn't know. Um, but what happens is now you have a kid who's not comfortable on the ball in the back, right? So at 16, they're pretty much useless to the higher end leagues and, at 17, 18 in the college game, you have a kid up front who probably only knows how to use speed, can't hold up the ball, can only go in the direction of their dominant foot. Um, and but that's not what the game here requires, right? The game here requires that you win the games so the club can advertise that they're wonderful.
It's an interesting take, and I completely see what you're talking about in terms of at the other clubs. So you always see it all the time that there are smaller clubs like Sevilla and Dortmund who have constantly just been not giving away, they're making tons of money, but they are bringing those kids up and then selling them off and then making more money and then just keeps reproducing, which I love because it causes that like competitiveness within the players to keep getting better. Whereas like you're saying on the here in the US, it's so much dictated almost by parent involvement, less about the player development. What about on the coaching side? What was going through like the UEFA courses? What were some of the things that you picked up there that you feel are a little bit, is it similar kind of differences there as well?
So I did them a while ago, so I can't really speak to how they are today, right? I've had them for over a decade. But what I would say is that the understanding of the game and to relay that onto the kids was much more of a focus than what I've done here in the US. And I've stopped taking US badges basically because I felt I was being hypocritical, right? I didn't want to tell anybody, oh, I'm a USSFC or B or whatever the badge is, but I don't believe in anything that they teach, so I'm not gonna do that. So I stopped that for that reason. I understand why coaches do it, right? If you need to do it for your livelihood, I get it, right? I don't think, but for me, it was, I don't believe in that method, and so I'm not going to go out there and promote that I have that license. The main difference is in Europe, in the coaching, you coach different things at different levels, but you always coach it with the end in mind. Where in the US, a lot of times you coach it for the short term in mind. And I give an example. So if you're talking about 8-year-olds and they're dribbling around cones, okay, you are going to get your 8-year-old to be able to have a little more confidence on the ball and stuff a little faster than if you had to have them dribble around live people, as opposed to dead people, I guess, but live people. Let's go with that. In Europe, they don't care as much, right? Because they don't care whether it takes them to U12 or U14 to become comfortable on the ball, because they're not going to sell them to 16 to 18. So the fact that they're a head down dribbler who can do it really fast at 11 doesn't make a difference. And so I had this, when I was coaching here in the States, I was telling, this always got me in trouble with the parents. I said, listen, I'm not teaching your kids how to be good at 10. I want to teach your kids how to be good at 16. Right? So anything that Mother Nature is going to take care of in the next 8 years, because they were 8, 9, 10-year-olds at the time, 6, 8 years, I'm not gonna spend time on. Right? So it has to do with like certain moves and stuff that you can get away with at 8 years old that a 16-year-old just takes you right off the field with. We didn't do any of those. When we're talking about speed, yes, there is a part in the game for speed, but mostly speed can be taken away with proper angles and stuff. An 11-year-old doesn't know that, but a 17-year-old does. Right? So we're not going to hyper focus on speed. And by speed, I mean speed of foot, not speed of play. We're not going to hyper focus on speed because at 17, you're either faster or you're not. And there's not a lot that a coach is going to do to make you faster. But if I can have you predict when to get into that space, which takes longer to do than just go run, that's going to help you at 17, where just, running with a parachute on your back at 11, I don't see has tremendous long-term value.
I love the idea of, it's almost like a game of patience. Like you're building for the long term. not forced. So it sounds like even like with the supplemental group that you're working with, like I'm not looking at how well you do next season or this. I'm looking at when you get to the college level, or if you go beyond, that's what we're building toward in terms of player development, which I think is really cool versus like you said, everything nowadays is so like one touch on a phone and I get the thing back. And I think that's something that we as a society are dealing with is I want it now. And that's like you said, the chasing of trophies and the validation through that versus the ones that want to just keep putting the work in over the long haul. One of the things I wanted to ask too.
Can I go back to what you just said? Because there's something that I do that is directly relevant to that. So one of the things I do when I get a bunch of new kids is I tend to get the oldest and fastest and the youngest and slowest. Right? And I'll say, I'm going to show you how having a high psycher IQ and how understanding the game and the space and stuff has to do with it. So I make the fastest one face away from me, and I have the slowest one face me. And I put them at like 10 to 15 yards away, and I put my hand up. And as I'm talking, I say, whenever I lower my hand, run as fast as you can to me. And the slowest player always wins. Right? Because by the time you recognize I put my hand down in a 10 to 15 yard sprint, the physical difference goes away. And that's what I try to tell the parents and the kids that have me. Listen, for the most part, the physical differences are going to go away. You're physically better now because you're further along in the Tanner stages. But once you hit the end of it, there's nowhere else to go. Everybody will eventually catch up. Right? There are very few kids who are fast at 10 aren't fast at 10 because they're further along in their maturation. Right? That's the majority of them, 80 to 90%. So if you don't teach them how to play, when everybody catches up physically, they're lost.
The thing that I love too about that is, which I get into a lot of conversations with coaches, especially like in the off season, is a lot of push for like speed and agility and lifting weights and all that stuff. And I'm like on the other end of the spectrum where I'm like, I need my guys to play more because I feel like the more you play, then the soccer IQ side of things gets kind of more developed or gives them opportunities, because it's fine to be able, like you said, I am the fastest person on the field, but if I am running in the wrong direction and don't see what's going on around me, I'm of no use to me on the field versus that one player who can actually see you with the hand up or with the ball at your foot, and I make myself available.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's all depending upon, you know, what your end goal is, right? And you know, I think, you know, especially in the youth soccer for the girls world, there is a part for strength training and stuff, but it's a balance, right? I don't think teams should be taking team training time to go do strength training. I do believe that if you want to be a top end player, you need to sleep well, you need to eat well, you need to do your strength training. But there's, you know, what is that, 10% of our population that really wants to do that? And if they're not willing to do the extra on their own, no matter what you do as a coach, you're not going to get them there. So take your team time, work on the things that they can't do on their own. Those who want to do stuff on their own will excel. Those who don't, well, they are not going to go anywhere anyway. Right? It's a recreational sport for them then.
That's so true. So true. Now, where in the soccer journey are your kids? And in terms of that, is there a chance that you do, like once they've moved on and they're kind of into more independent, do you go back into coaching and maybe look at creating opportunities that way as well?
Yeah. So my daughter's U16, my son's U15. So my daughter just started looking at colleges and stuff. My son's probably 2 years away, one because he's a year younger and one because boys start a year later. So that's what it is. I have made a couple attempts to buy clubs here in around where I live, but it's just such a cash flow thing for the people who own them now that it's difficult to get somebody to sit there and give that up. But that's my goal, right? I'm looking to purchase a club. I'm looking to fund it in such a way that kids don't have to pay these exorbitant fees, and that's my goal. And I've already started that process. I'd like to say I was further along in it, but I'm not. It's more difficult to do than you would think. Maybe at some point in time, I'll give up the thought of, hey, I want to buy a club that already has 800 kids, 1,000 kids, and just start one on my own. But I'm not there yet. I'm still hopeful to get something that already exists and take a few years off my timeline.
Would you want to streamline whatever club that you may end up purchasing or developing or owning, and set it up similar to the academies overseas, and be more of kind of end driven, like maybe change the mindset a little bit of what's going on in youth soccer?
Yeah, so I'm fairly fortunate that I don't need to do this for a living. So I'm not looking to make money out of this or anything. I look at it as a way, it's almost like my community service. So yeah, I wanted to do what I'd like to do is having a niche organization for kids that want to play, professional D1 ball, depending upon, where they fall. That's my goal. And hopefully we'll get there sooner than later.
With the supplemental type thing, how often is that, did you say? And is that something that you might, while you're waiting to do this, is that something you look at and maybe possibly grow that to be a little bit larger?
So right now, it's several times a week. So we just got off Christmas break, so that was 4 times that week. Generally, it's 2, maybe 3 times. In the summer, I'll do 3 or 4 summer camps, which would be 2 weeks long, at like 10 sessions each. So it all has to do with how much time allows. My big thing is to keep the cost down. Right now it's free. And I'd like to target that number. And it's people need to put bread on the table. I get it, but that goes into conflict with my free. So so that's where I am. It's just the amount of resources. And the other thing is I'm small enough that the clubs in the area don't give me a hard time. I mean, I've only had one coach that ever really complained. And that was because I was doing things differently than he was. And the coach, some of the parents were like, well, why do you do this? So, why aren't you, running the kids for, like 3 miles before practice? And I'm like, well, I don't believe in any of that. And he thought that was me taking a shot at him. And I wasn't taking a shot at him. I was taking a shot of, the methodologies that, are very common out here. So, but other than that one instance, nobody's complained. I think if I got to like 200 kids, I think a lot of the local clubs would start complaining, and then you got to deal with the politics. Right now, I'm outside of all that. I'm small enough that I just fly under the radar and nobody gives me a hard time.
Where do you hold your sessions at? Is there just a local park, or is there a school that allows you to kind of use their facilities?
So I in not this time of year. So this time of year, I rent some small facilities, and the facilities places know what I do and know that I don't charge, so the rates are very reasonable. And then in the once we get to the spring through the fall, so I would say close to 40 weeks out of the year, I'll work at like town facilities and school facilities that I've arranged that they don't charge us because they know we don't charge the families and stuff.
What's the kind of the soccer environment up in that area that you live? Is it like just super full of just clubs and players all over the place, or kind of what's the makeup of, like, I'm here in Ohio, and we've got a pretty good solid base of players and such. But what is the environment, the playing culture, I guess, out that way?
So within an hour drive of me, there are two MLS Next clubs, three GAs, and five, maybe no, six ECNL clubs, all within an hour drive.
Wow.
So the amount of kids that think they're elite players is quite a bit.
Is it's almost it's interesting with everything that you've said about the differences between overseas and here and player development and the focus and such. Almost you just pointing out the number of those elite quote unquote opportunities almost points to the issue, because there's clearly not that many, to be honest, that would have to be considered elite, that are in some of those academies.
Yeah, so I have still contacts over in the European clubs and stuff. And I would say in the last 6 years, I've made two phone calls for kids that I thought, was worth the European club looking at. So how many kids do I see? I see thousands every year. And I thought there were two that showed like really top end promise.
Is there, I guess now the question becomes like, so there's clearly kind of a cultural, I don't know if I call it a problem, but an obstacle. Is there a fix? Is there a way that we can do a better job of player development, you think, here in the States?
But, I think you got to look at the premise of the question, right? I don't think the gatekeepers of the system think there's a problem, right? I just don't. Um, if you own an ECNL club or run an ECNL club, right, you have that badge. That's going to give you a pipeline of kids that come in. That's going to ring the cash register every year. What's the problem, right? Because you're not getting paid on how many kids you send to pro leagues. You're getting paid on how many kids you get to walk in the door at 11 years old, and how many are willing to pay. The prices out here are close to $4,000 a year, plus tournaments, plus. So it's a problem for people who look at the landscape differently. I'm not sure it's a problem for the people who are currently in the landscape.
Yeah, because I was going to say that's why I was really interested in if and when you have a club, and clearly your mindset is a little bit different than what is now like the norm. And I was wondering what that trickle effect of, if you were to start pushing and saying, hey, we're going a different direction, what that would look like in the landscape of like all of those academies around you, and you start producing players that, hey, I'm going beyond, like we're going big, like bigger. I want to be making more than two phone calls in the span of 20 years or whatever. And what that would look like, and the power that maybe one person like you and one club could have on maybe the landscape of what's going on here in the
Yeah,
state.
I think if you look at it, I'm not looking to be all things in the pyramid, right? So there's a place for your top end places here that I'm not looking to, you know, move, push aside, right? I want to take your 10 to 17-year-old and make them ready for that next level. And if that level is an MLS academy, or a top GA club or top ECNL club, or somewhere over in Europe, that's my role. I want to get the kids ready for that. I don't want to supplement. I don't want to take over that, right? I have a very specific part of that pyramid that I'm looking to target. And so for me, if I had, let's say, boys, right, because the boys have the MLS next stuff, NWSL doesn't really have that at the moment. They basically come out of college. But I would love to be the place where, and I'm in between Philadelphia Union and Red Bulls, where, they come in and at 16 years old, they're decimating my team. To me, that's the pinnacle of success. When the top end of the pyramid comes in, then it goes, that's where I want to recruit from. Or, your top, D1 organizations are saying, hey, look, I want those kids. To me, that's where I want to be. I don't want to be that competing with the MLS Next Academy, or, some of like there are ECNL clubs on the girls' side that are doing a great job. I'm not looking to compete with them. I'm looking to feed them.
I think that's such a cool kind of idea, because I almost in my head was thinking like baseball, where you almost have like the minor leagues or what have you, and it's like a feeder system type of thing. And I love the idea of like, look, when my players get to a point where they're good enough to go somewhere else bigger, then I want them to go. Versus what I think happens a lot now is people just want to keep them all and to keep building and like, oh, I'm going to keep that team together forever. Like, no, that's not, like, I'm trying to get those kids to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. The other thing that I was wondering is how important, because I see this a little bit, do you think is it that our youth clubs becomes partners with clubs overseas? Is that more again of just like, hey, look, we've got a badge and now it brings in more kids? Or is there something that could be actually productive and useful for that?
So, for me, right, I'm having like some beginning conversations, so I'm going to leave out who the players are, right? There is an overseas entity that I'm looking to bring into the fold, but I'm looking to bring them into the fold as a coaching methodology, not as a marketing partner. And the reason for that is, if you look at like the big clubs and, the ones that, did the Byrons, did this, did that, basically those were marketing arrangements. Those were uniform deals, right?
Yep.
You had the same coaches who were doing the same things. They just had nicer uniforms or different uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm not really sure how that benefited the kids. So when I look at like partnering with some of the European entities that I know, it's all about making the organization better to help the kids, and not so much the marketing side of it, which I think is where most of the effort is right now.
The one thing too you brought up is conversations with parents. And I know from my experience, that's like one of the biggest things as a coach and a director of coaching and all this type of stuff is parental education. What has that experience been with you, especially with like this group that you're dealing with, the supplementals, and like how you're kind of a different direction with it? What's that conversation been? Especially because I know some parents they just don't get it sometimes. And what's some of the pushback, and how have you dealt with maybe some of the like uncertainty?
Yeah. So for me, it's been pretty easy. I take a very different approach. Any parent can come have a conversation at any time. I'll explain why I do things, and I'll have that conversation with you. I also, any of my sessions or practices and stuff, you're more than willing to, film it if you want. I don't care. So it's completely open. And listen, if I'm not your cup of tea, go down the block. I don't care. Right? I don't charge anything. So other than you taking one less head count away from me, I still have plenty of kids who want to come in. Like I won't run a practice with more than 22 kids with just myself. I just won't do it. Right? So I have kids that want to come into sessions who, because I limit the numbers, can't. If you don't believe in what we're doing, and I'm completely open about it, go somewhere else.
The one thing that's cool about it is, like you said, they're not paying anything. So the expectation is like, I'm setting this up how I want to set it up. Here's how we're doing it. Here's the expectations. And like you said, if you're bought in and you want to do it, let's rock and roll. You're more than welcome to go. And if you want to spend money on whatever session and you want to get like all the extra little extra whatever they throw in, then do it. But I think it's really cool how you're just like, look, here's how it is, and show up. Let's do some work.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I have people who leave, absolutely, who are like, I'm a very positional play type of guy. I mean, those are the things I believe in. I don't do, you know, step overs and scissors and all that stuff. It's just not how I teach. Now, if you're trying to do a scissor in one of our sessions and you don't do it right, yeah, I'll take you aside and I'll help you on that technique. But I'm never doing a step over session, right? It doesn't happen. But there are parents who are out there saying, well, I went to coach X, Y, and Z, and they had ladders and they had parachutes and they had us running through cones and stuff. And, my 11-year-old really needs to get physically fit. I'm like, well, don't take them to McDonald's after practice and that'll do just as much. It's just, if that's what you believe in, if you believe in that the problem with the 11-year-old soccer players, they're not fit enough, then I'm not your guy.
uh, the one thing too that I love about it is, like you just, even that comment you just made was like, I'm here with the goal of developing your player. So if what I'm doing doesn't fit, then I think you have options. And I love the idea of like, it's not just, I think sometimes coaches get so caught up in like, my way is the right way or the best way. Like you said, it's got to be fit the player as much as it fits what you're doing with them. What has been the experience, because you have all this kind of knowledge and what have you, what's the experience been like when you had to take that step back as a coach with your daughter and your son playing? What's that like, being on the other side, being a fan, getting in the car after games, all that type of stuff? What's that been?
It's a lot of tongue biting, to tell you the truth. I'll tell you a story. So my son moved to a club several years ago. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago now, and he had a young coach. And coach is maybe 23 years old and stuff. Probably an E-licensed coach or whatever. And I think he was taking his D class, and this is when U.S. soccer for the real youth was in that play, practice, play.
Mm-hmm.
That was their big push. And I watched it, and he basically set up like some small-sided games, but never said a word. Basically these were, what was he at the time? 10 years old ish, give or take. And he would go out there, and so after the third time of him doing this, I just pulled him aside and I said, explain to me, what are you trying to get here? He goes, well, you don't understand. And I was like, okay. And remember, now I'm dad.
Yep.
Right. Very different. I was like, well, he goes, this is the newest thing with US soccer and stuff. And then he went online and like made comments about how, parents just don't understand. And somebody actually had the audacity to ask him why he was doing what he was doing. And then I sent him a nice little email. I said, hey, you may want to, look me up before you, make comments like that, because I understand what play, practice, play is. I've done all that stuff. I just don't think you were doing it well. And so I was questioning what you were doing at the time. And, that was probably one of the few times I've ever gone to a coach and been like, really? My daughter has a coach now who believes in unopposed passing patterns. I couldn't be more diametrically opposed to that. And we know it. But, he brings lots of other things good to the thing. I think he's a great guy, and my daughter learns a lot from him. So I keep my mouth shut on the unopposed passing patterns. But if you asked him how I thought about unopposed passing patterns, he knows exactly where I stand on it. But, it's, different things for different folks, and you can learn different things. And, just because I have a methodological difference with somebody doesn't mean they're a bad coach. It means I believe in a different way. There are things that, coaches do out there that they do much better than I. That's fine. I don't have to agree with everything you do. Just do it well.
The one thing I was going to ask too, with your daughter's coach, with the unopposed passing and stuff, is he more open to the conversation with you, like the give and take? Whereas it's like, no,
I don't know if he's open. I've never tried to engage in it.
So is that based on your previous experience with this other coach that maybe if I bring it up, it just wasn't taken openly? Or because for me, the more things that we conversate on Twitter, that we have in these conversations like we're having now, I feel like the more you get to hear other sides of things. I'm a big, I mean, that's why we got the pot is the chat about things. And I just wonder sometimes if we're missing out on those opportunities because both sides could learn something from the other if you actually had a open discourse.
Yeah, I think that's where, I crossed the line between being somebody who's also coached for many years and have done so at some fairly high levels, and the parent.
Mm-hmm.
In the situation with my kids, I'm parent, right? And I have to be really cognizant of that. Some of the other parents like know my background and stuff. So if you ever see me on the sideline, I'm off on my own, right? I don't want to talk to people, because sometimes I'll, just utter something that I don't want other people to hear. And I don't engage in conversations a lot with parents. I do, one of the things I do on the side is there's one of the soccer agencies that I work with that help kids get into college. And again, I do it completely free, right? I donate every bit of what they give me back to the kids, right? So it's not about, making money. And trust me, I'm sure they have their issues with me because I give way too much away. Some kid, they're like, oh, we could sign that kid up. I'm like, why do you sign that kid up? The kid needs, a half an hour of a conversation and they can be on their little merry way. But so I'm not a good employee in that sense. But they give me a way to, help kids, in that journey as well. And so, depending upon the hat that I'm wearing, there are lines that I don't cross. Right. And I'm not there to make this coach's life more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if he ever wanted to have, he knows that if he ever wanted to have a coffee and talk theory with me, I'd drive to his house, as soon as we got off the call. But, he believes what he believes, and that's fine. We can all have different beliefs. There are things that he believes in that are holes in my own child's game because I don't believe in him. That's also fine. So that's the parent hat. I think as a parent who's also coached at a high level, you have to understand when to wear what and what lines not to cross. And sometimes I do it well and sometimes I don't, but I try to do my best.
I think it's really cool. It's almost like a little self-awareness of knowing, like you said, where the line is at. And the idea of even separating yourself from the other parents and like kind of just being off on your own. So your kids can just experience it, learn from it, and then grow. The other thing that is been kind of constant throughout is the idea of doing stuff for free or making an impact without any expectation of getting anything. Where did that come from? Like, where has this kind of like idea of I'm going to do this, but I'm doing it for free. I'm here for the players, et cetera, et cetera.
So I don't want it to make it sound like I don't get anything out of it. What I don't get out of it is money. There's a big difference between the two. Mm-hmm. Like there is very few things in my life that bring me more joy than teaching somebody something on a soccer field and have that kid have that eureka moment. I mean, I could ride that for weeks. I've had kids that I've helped get into colleges who wrote me a note. I'm cloud nine. To me, that's what makes my life full. I don't need the money. Like I said, I'm very fortunate in the fact that I don't need the money. Like I'm retired. I'm 54 years old. I have everything I could possibly want. I have everything my kids could possibly want. So I feel as a human being on this planet, being that all my needs are met in that area, right, in the monetary stuff, that let me do what I can to help others who may not have gotten the fortunate opportunities that I have. When I was trying to get into coaching, I called people at some of the largest academies in the world who helped me get European coaching license. Didn't have to do it. didn't get anything for it, right? They didn't say, hey, write me a check for $10,000 and I'll help you get you A for B. No, they did it because, hey, here was somebody who wanted to do something. It, they just wanted to help the community. And because there's been many instances in my life where that's happened, I feel, as a member of society, it's my responsibility to give back where I can.
I was going to ask too, because you were talking about some of the impacts that have occurred with you. Is there like a mentor or someone that you look back and go, that was someone that kind of put me on this kind of coaching journey, or where you're at now?
So I'm not so quite sure there's a single mentor. I would say that there's numerous people that have affected my path. And, you know, there were people at the IAX Academy when I went there who took time and stuff and sat with me and told me about what they were doing and why they were doing it and what their methods were. And I basically bought them dinner, right? I would say, come on, I'll buy you some dinner, but I want to pick your brain for an hour and a half, you know? And so there was a lot of that, I was fortunate enough to meet Todd Bean, you know, probably 5, 6 years ago now. And he's been, great with sharing his knowledge and stuff with me. Again, I'm fortunate that, on a whim, I could hop on a plane and go to Spain and, sit with him for a week if I want. He's open to it. Um, but I also understand that I have the ability to do things that most don't. And because of that, I feel it's my obligation to give back.
The thing that I love is, one, you seem like you're a very curious, like always learning. The fact that you would say, hey, let's sit down for an hour and a half and let's just talk shop, um, even back when you were younger, I think is really cool. Is that something, even as a kid, as you were growing up, were you always kind of a curious thing? And the idea of helping others, was that something even as a youth when you were going through high school and stuff? Were you always kind of one of those that wanted to make impacts, or is this something that's kind of come about just from your experience growing up?
So I think it's something that's kind of evolved. When I was younger, and you'd get into the rat race, and at first you wanted, enough money so you can move out of mom and dad's house, right? And then you wanted, enough money to buy your family a nice house, and then you wanted to move into the bigger house and the better schools or whatever it is. But there came a time that those things became more superficial and less part of who I am. And so I was looking for things that filled the other holes in me as a human being. And so it kind of evolved into, like, once I had all that stuff, now what do I do? And so, like I said, I have this one boy, he's, I don't know, 13-ish, and he just lights up when he's able to prep his body early enough. Like when he's able to read a play that's 2 passes away and he gets it right, the kid's eyes just light up. And, I go home and nothing else really matters. And to me, that's just where I am now.
You started at, when we talking about your wife saying, hey, you have to make a decision. What has she been in terms of as your support with all of these things that, like doing the supplemental, the possibility of maybe getting your own club and stuff? Where has she fit within this equation?
So, we have this conversation often. So she's incredibly understanding that I'm an obsessive person by nature. And it hasn't changed in 23 years. I don't think it's going to. And she's very accepting of that. And I think she kind of looks at it like, I don't drink, so I'm not going out to the bars. I'm not running around doing this or doing that. This is my outlet. And as far as all the outlets that are out there, this one's not so bad. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes she has to, crack the whip and get me back in line. But as a general statement, I think she looks at it as all the things he could be out there doing. This isn't too bad. I mean, we have plenty of friends, who are 3-4 times out there on a golf course, 4 hours a shot. I'm on a soccer field.
Yeah, I think it's been really, really refreshing to kind of hear little stories and anecdotals like that about the spouse or the other person that's part of the makeup. And it's really cool to hear kind of that understanding of like, this is who you are. And like you said, you're making a really positive impact. And so to hear that she's like, I'd rather have him doing that versus, like you said, too many bad options out there that could be taken away. One of the things I wanted to do too is this has been awesome. And I want to make sure people have an opportunity to connect and possibly follow along and see maybe where, maybe the club thing opens up, or to kind of see what happens with some of the supplemental, like some of the players in that mix. So what are some ways that people can connect with you?
So probably the easiest way to me is my Twitter account. I spend way too much time on there. You can tell I'm retired. So that's probably the easiest way. Like I said, I don't use a club website or anything, because that's all by word of mouth. But somebody shoots me a DM there. Mine are open. I'll give you my email, my phone number. Heck, you want to come over for dinner? That's fine.
I think the cool thing too is, like, it sounds like even if you were like, hey, I'm going to be in the area and my kid, can he come out for like just catch a session? And from what I've heard, you'd be like, yeah, come on out. Let's do this.
Yeah, I never turn a kid away.
Yeah, let's rock and roll, which I think is so refreshing. Is like, look, I'm here. I'm going to be there from, time, whatever, 6 to 8, whatever. We're going to be rocking and rolling. So if your kid wants to come, and like you said, I keep it down to my 22 or whatever it is, and we do it. So I've absolutely loved this chat. Steve, I appreciate you hopping on with me.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Kieran. All the success in the future. Love what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm going to shut this thing down. This is Kieran with Coach's Corner Chats with Steve Rollins, and I'm out. Peace.